Hello and welcome to Chapter 4. This is Dr. Robinson and we're going to talk about RTI and progress monitoring as it relates to assessment in special education. So when we look at RTI, there's a couple of things that you really need to make sure that you understand. First, and we discussed this in Chapter 2, RTI is a general ed initiative. I know our friends in Gen Ed want to make it special ed, but it's not. And it was designed to help prevent academic failure. So the whole idea behind this is that if we have students that we know are having difficulty and we give them effective instruction designed to meet the needs that they have and their specific deficits, then hopefully they will get better and be able to go back to Gen Ed. One of the things that really became a key hallmark of RTI is that it provides assistance in obtaining, sharing, and using student data to make informed decisions and promote school-based changes in curriculum and structure to ensure student success in academic and behavioral areas. So what does this mean? Well, when RTI came out, it really took the emphasis away from a teacher coming in and saying, you know, June's having reading difficulty. I know she blah, blah, blah. You had to be able to have data to show that. Well, how do you know that? You know, it's good to have the teacher's gut instinct and know what your students know, but you also have to be able to give us something to base that on. So it really forced teachers and school districts to start looking at what did we truly know about students? And how would we make decisions based upon that data? So again, it is a general ed initiative. What we do when we set this up for a school is we have to make sure that it's adopted across the school and that everyone conforms to it. It's not special ed. All teachers are to contribute, but we know that as special ed teachers, we often know ways to figure out the best interventions to try with the student. So you will probably be a part of this. And we also know from RTI, from Chapter 2, that we are required to include not only academic, but behavior. And we do that through PBS or PBIS, positive behavioral interventions and support systems. So where did this come from? Well, you remember that in 2004, IDEIA, often called IDEA, was signed into law. And in terms of RTI, it came up with a couple of different ideas that you're familiar with. One, and Indiana did do this, that we could no longer just use the discrepancy model for the identification of students with learning disabilities. And why this was key is that we got away from that wait to fail. Instead of waiting for students to be so far behind their Gen Ed peers, we now would be able to start putting interventions in place. So if we start noticing they're behind, instead of saying, yep, they're behind, let's wait longer, we said, no, let's start doing something about it. That's our whole goal, is let's catch them before they're too far behind. So again, our hope is that we will put a student back in Gen Ed, that they won't need us in our interventions. And that's really the whole goal behind response to intervention. So what is that RTI process? And I know that you're familiar with some of this because you've done your RTI assignment, but let's just go over them real quick. The first one is the idea of a universal screeners. Schools now give universal screeners. That might be, if you're in elementary school, a DIBELS Next Gen, something like that. And what we do is we look at these benchmark tests that might be given, I start talking and I start yawning, 3 times a year, and that's our benchmark, and it would tell us if you're red, yellow, or green, or we might give a CBM, a curriculum-based measure, and it would tell us where you fare compared to other students. So we start looking at that data for your classroom, and often you do this on a computer. I know NWA, Ames Web, and some of the other computerized programs do this for you. And you start categorizing your students, red, yellows, and greens. Who do I need to really worry about? Who are my high flyers? Doing fine. So the students that might be red, meaning they are most at risk for failure in reading or math or whatever that particular skill you looked at, they're going to start receiving those interventions based upon their needs. Everybody shouldn't get the same thing. It should be based upon what they need. I should not be in a reading group if my math scores are red. We don't just throw kids into groups. We make it specific to what their needs are. So we start giving them these specific interventions, and we try it for a while, and then we measure their progress. We give these brief repeated tests, often probes, that show, has what I've been doing, is it working? Do I keep doing it, or do I do something else? And so we start to look at what is, again, their response to intervention. Hopefully, they'll be able to get out of the system. One of the hallmarks of the RTI process is the evidence-based interventions. And early on, this was a little bit harder because it started out as research-based evidence or research-based interventions, and now we've come to evidence-based. And what this says is that an EBI is defined as an instructional program or strategy that is research-based or reflects scientifically validated practices in teaching. So there are things we know work, but we have to look at the research. It can't just be me trying to promote Dr. June's amazing behavior program and give you research that I've done all the research. That's not evidence-based. You are good consumers of research. You know that that research must have been replicated by other people outside Dr. June's behavior program. So we look at those problems. We start saying, where are the students going to be? Red, yellow, or green? We're going to differentiate our instruction, and we're going to determine what we're going to do with the students. As we stated earlier, Indiana is one of the 13 states that does require some level of RTI to be used to see if students are responding to intervention. Part of this is because originally there was the thought that maybe some of the students identified as learning disabled were really instructionally disabled, which is one of the reasons behind RTI. So RTI comes in and, teachers did not jump on the bandwagon. And what we found were there are a couple of things that need to be in place. One is a strong leader. I can tell you as the district level leader who helped put this in place in one district, or prior to that as a school-based leader, you have to have people who are committed to this. And a core group of teachers in your building who are willing to serve on this. It might be one person from each grade level that attends. If we're talking about a third grade teacher, then Mrs. Smith from third grade student, Mrs. Smith from third grade attends. Obviously, the classroom teacher would attend. If we're talking about reading, your reading interventionist might attend. A special ed teacher might attend. If it's a behavior problem, your social worker might attend. So you have to have not only strong leadership at the district level to help lay this out, you have to have a principal who realizes this is important and makes those teachers who don't really want to be involved get involved. You have to have a strong core or general ed curriculum. We are supposed to be making sure that 80% of our students are achieving with the general ed curriculum. We know in some districts that's not happening, but we also know that by doing things like curriculum mapping and standard-based teaching, we at least know that we're all teaching towards the same goals. Prior to standards, we didn't always do that. It was pretty much, if you wanted to teach dinosaurs in third grade and I wanted to teach it in fourth grade, usually teachers did it. Now, we had to give up something to teach 9 weeks each on dinosaurs, even though the kids had already gotten it in second grade. But now with the standards, we want to make sure we have that effective general ed core curriculum. And then what really is the selling point is having those series of interventions or practices that we can put in place. So when I trained our interventionalists along with my school psychometrist and psychologist, We gave them ideas. We said, here are resources. These are books you can use. Here are some, manipulatives, different things that you can do to help students gain these skills. If it's a phonemic awareness problems, here's 10 things you can try. If it's a math problem, here's 10 things you can try. Because we want to be able to make it easier for teachers to give those interventions, but we also want them to be targeted interventions. And so we would find things that went along with very specific issues in math or very specific issues in reading, so that the teachers would be more comfortable with having to give these interventions if they had something at their fingertips. So another key hallmark of RTI is progress monitoring. And what we tend to see are probes or short tests that cover a very specific area, and we will give those over and over again. And if you, in your book, I'm around page 69 or so, you'll see the name Fuchs, F-U-C-H-S. Fuchs and Fuchs, Lynn and Doug Fuchs, down at Vanderbilt, did a lot of the initial research with RTI. And we have found a lot of different things about RTI. We know that the probes can be used in any area. We often see them in early literacy, oral reading fluency, reading comprehension, writing, math computation. Many of them are non-discriminatory, culturally sensitive. We know that we have to do that. We also have some behavior management probes that we can use. So we know that there's a lot of different types of probes. If you look in your book at page 70, you're going to be able to see a series of these. So when we look at some of the probes that are available, you'll also see that we talk about curriculum-based measurement. And what this is, it's a series of standardized brief tests or probes. They were originally developed to help special ed teachers in developing IEPs. And page 70, as I said, gives you a lot of different examples. I've also given you an example here from interventioncentral.org. And these are free probes that you can use. You can create your own worksheets. You can create your own progress monitoring documents. They're wonderful. A couple of key ideas when we talk about CBM. One of them is that they're designed efficiently for use. Many CBMs take 1 to 3 minutes. So that means as a teacher, you're not spending 10 minutes with one student. You're doing something that's quick and easy. Find out what they know and go on. And they're often very standardized. If you've ever used Dibbles or some of the Ames Web or Acuity materials, you know that there are directions. So like with an oral reading fluency probe, you might have a student read a leveled text for 1 minute. We record the errors, kind of like if you've watched the video, you saw her do, and you can determine where your student is at in relation to where the student should be. Another thing that we know is that there's often availability of multiple forms. So think about when you're trying to get students to learn their multiplication facts. You can run off 10 different versions of a worksheet for 0 to 10 facts. And the problems are in all different order, but you're testing the same skill just in different forms, form A, B, C, and D. And that becomes some of the key hallmarks. And when they're called curriculum-based, be aware that means the general curriculum overall. It's not curriculum that is tied to your reading series or your math series. It's curriculum overall, the scope and sequence. And so that becomes important because then if I as a 4th grade teacher in Indiana and you as a 4th grade teacher or me in Fort Wayne and you in Evansville, our 4th graders should be at about the same level. We should be able to use the same type of text because our students should be at the same standard. Hybrid assessment systems. I will tell you, this is not something that I will be assessing you on. I want you to overall understanding. But basically, this is page 76 of your book, has some examples. And these are based on item response systems. And one of the things that you may have seen with these are computerized systems that tend to adapt and learn from your responses. So when I took the GRE to get into grad school, I missed some math problems. You were supposed to do them highest to lowest or lowest to highest, and I was doing it the opposite way. And it learned from what I was doing and it backtracked. Now, it didn't go back to the previous problem. It went to an easier skill. So if you've seen some of these testing materials, or I believe Read 180 has a component that does this, it goes back to where the student is at. So if they miss too many, it makes it a little bit easier. It doesn't let students hit that high frustration level. And so the other nice thing about these systems is often if you've used NWEA or Star Reading or Easy CBM, they can print out these lovely charts for you. And it's really great because they give you a report that tells you where your student is at and what they do as compared to other 8th graders, as compared to other 3rd graders. And so that really helps as a teacher because then you're able to determine where is my student and what skills does my student need. Well, if you remember our little graphic up in the corner, one of the things that RTI requires is not only academic interventions, but also behavioral interventions. And we know that if students aren't in school because of their behavior, they're often not learning. And so often we put in positive behavioral interventions and supports, PBS or PBIS. And we know from all of the research that PBIS has had a dramatic impact on what we call the organizational health of schools. It's gone from shifting things from being punitive to trying to make them positive. And if you look at the PBIS Center, and we're going to do some of that, you're going to see the name Rob Horner come up a lot, George Sagai, Greg Brenner, Brenner. They're all out of the University of Oregon. And they really were leading the charge in this. That's also where Dibbles is. So one of the ways that we track students and determine what the problem in our building is we look at office discipline referrals, and this is for any time we're sending a student out. So we look at those and we do some data analysis as our behavior team. And you know, I was in a school district here in Fort Wayne that did this a long time ago. It was the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. And we started saying, why are kids sent to the office? So we went through the data management system and we found that it was because they were either fighting or for disrespect, that if they got in trouble, it was generally on the playground or in the bathroom. You know, we started looking at what areas of the building were a problem and what were the behaviors that we were seeing that were the problem. So we identify those first. The second part of that then is to start creating school-wide expectations. And some places will make it fit the mascot of the school. You know, like if you're the Bears, they might, you might have your, be respectful and, that we expect you to put effort forward for your E and, different things like that. But I've given you a little graphic here of some of the types of school-wide behaviors that you will see listed as your expectations. I noticed that they're all stated very positively. And that becomes very important because you're telling students what you want them to do. We go from the premise that if students aren't doing what we want, maybe we have to teach it. Now, luckily for teachers, you don't have to create a lot of the behavior measurement systems. They are done for you. The BASC is a very popular one that you see there. It's purple. It can be sent home to parents. It can go to students. It can go to teachers. You fill out your rating scale, and the school psychologist puts it in, or whoever does it, the behavior specialist, puts it into a little computer program. Thank God we don't have to do these by hand anymore. And it tells us where your student is compared to other students. It kind of gives you a red, yellow, or green based upon the student norms. Another areas of concern are often, you'll see different systems. I've got another one on there where they will actually give you different types of interventions that you can put in place. So they'll say, you know, Key Math does this, for an example. If you're having this difficulty, try this intervention. That might work. So sometimes they will even pair those up for you.